Margaret's fracture happened on a Tuesday morning in her own kitchen, not on a hiking trail, not on an icy pavement, not in any of the circumstances that people imagine when they think about broken bones in older adults. She was reaching across the kitchen counter to move a ceramic pot she had moved 1,000 times before, and something gave way. A sound you would describe to anyone who asks as not a crack, but a collapse, as though the bone had been waiting for permission to fail. She was 67 years old. She had never broken a bone in her life. She walked every day, ate reasonably well by any ordinary measure, and had been told at her last checkup that her health was, for her age, good. What nobody had told Margaret, what had never come up in any of the conversations she had with any of the doctors she had seen across the previous decade, was that for years she had been consuming, daily and without suspicion, a combination of drinks that were doing something precise and measurable to the bones inside her body. Not dramatically, not in any way she could feel, but consistently, cumulatively, and in ways that the research now documents with extraordinary clarity. The ceramic pot weighed less than 2 kilograms. The bone that failed had been losing its density for years, and the drinks that had accelerated that loss were sitting at the moment of the fracture in her refrigerator and on her kitchen counter. The same drinks they had always been, the same drinks most people reading this have in their homes right now. Margaret spent 6 weeks in rehabilitation. She had time, more time than she wanted, to think about the things she had not known. And the question she came back to most often, lying in the hospital bed in the second week, was not why did this happen? It was why did nobody tell me? Today somebody is going to tell you. Because the story of bone density loss after 60 is not simply the story of calcium and exercise and the slow passage of time. It is also, and this is the part that almost never makes it into the conversation, the story of what you drink. 7 specific drinks that the research now identifies as active contributors to accelerated bone density loss in adults over 60. Drinks that most people consume without any awareness of what is happening inside their skeleton while they do. We're going to go through all 7. We're going to explain the exact biological mechanism behind each one, not in vague terms, not in the language of general health advice, but precisely, specifically, in the way that Margaret deserved to have it explained before the Tuesday morning in her kitchen. Stay with me through to drink number 3, because that is the one that will stop most people reading this. Not because it is the most obscure, because it is the most ordinary, because it is in all likelihood sitting in your kitchen right now. Before we go any further, everything in this video is grounded in peer-reviewed research and published nutritional and medical studies. It is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for the advice of your personal physician or registered dietitian. Bone density loss is a serious medical concern that requires individualized assessment and management. Please speak with your doctor before making changes to your diet or lifestyle, particularly if you have been diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia, or if you have a history of fractures. Your body is unique and deserves personalized care. By the end of this video, you will know all 7 drinks, exactly what each one is doing to your bones at a biological level, and one specific change you can make for each one starting today. Not deprivation, not the elimination of every pleasure from your daily life. Informed choice. The kind of informed choice that Margaret did not have, and that you deserve to have, before the kitchen counter and ceramic pot, and the sound that was not a crack, but a collapse. The drink that pulls calcium from your bones every time you swallow it. Let's begin with the one that has the longest and most extensively documented relationship with bone density loss, and the one that most people in this audience will have been told, at some point, is actually good for them. Fizzy drinks, carbonated soft drinks, sodas, cola in particular, but not only cola. The relationship between carbonated soft drink consumption and bone density loss has been studied for over 3 decades, and the findings are consistent enough that researchers no longer debate whether the relationship exists. They debate only the precise mechanism, and the mechanisms, it turns out, are multiple and they work simultaneously. The first mechanism is phosphoric acid. Cola drinks, both regular and diet, contain phosphoric acid as a flavoring agent. Phosphoric acid is highly effective at creating the sharp, slightly astringent taste that gives cola its characteristic bite. It is also, once inside the body, a significant disruptor of calcium metabolism. The human body regulates the ratio of calcium to phosphorus in the blood with extraordinary precision. When phosphoric acid enters the bloodstream and raises the phosphorus level, the body responds by pulling calcium from its primary calcium reservoir, the bones, to restore the ratio. This process is called calcium resorption. It is not dramatic. It is not painful. It does not announce itself. It simply occurs quietly and efficiently every time a significant amount of phosphoric acid enters the bloodstream. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that women who consumed cola daily had significantly lower bone mineral density at the hip, the most clinically dangerous site of bone density loss, than those who did not consume cola, regardless of their calcium intake, not despite eating enough calcium. Regardless of it, the phosphoric acid was pulling calcium out faster than dietary intake could replace it. The second mechanism applies to all carbonated soft drinks, not only cola. When carbon dioxide dissolves in water to create carbonation, it forms carbonic acid. Carbonic acid temporarily lowers the pH of the blood, making it slightly more acidic. The body responds to this mild acidic shift by releasing calcium and other alkaline minerals from bone to buffer the acidity and restore the blood's pH balance. Again, not dramatic, not painful, not felt, simply occurring every time, with every can, with every glass. The third mechanism is displacement. Adults who consume significant quantities of fizzy drinks tend to consume less milk, less fortified plant milk, less calcium-rich water, less of everything that builds bone. The fizzy drink is not just damaging bone through its chemistry. It is occupying the space in the day that something bone-building could have occupied instead. Dorothy is 71. She has drunk 2 cans of Diet Cola every day since her late 30s. She chose Diet Cola specifically because she was trying to manage her weight. The regular version had too much sugar. She had been told that diet drinks, having no sugar and no calories, were a neutral choice. No one had ever mentioned phosphoric acid. No one had ever mentioned calcium resorption. No one had ever mentioned that the diet in Diet Cola referred to calorie content and said nothing whatsoever about what the drink was doing to her skeleton. Her DEXA scan at 71 revealed osteoporosis in both hips and the lumbar spine. Her fracture risk assessment placed her in the high-risk category. Her calcium intake, her GP noted, had been adequate throughout her adult life. The problem was not what was going in. The problem was what was being pulled out. Dorothy switched to sparkling water with a slice of lemon. The fizz she had always wanted without the phosphoric acid she had never been told about. Her follow-up scan at 73 showed that the rate of bone density loss had slowed significantly. It did not reverse what had already happened, but it stopped the acceleration. And stopping the acceleration was... Her GP told her the most important thing, if fizzy drinks are part of your daily life, and particularly if cola, diet, or otherwise, is a daily habit, understand that every can is initiating a calcium withdrawal from an account that gets harder to replenish with every passing year after 60. The change does not have to be dramatic. Sparkling water, herbal sparkling drinks, water with citrus and mint. The carbonation without the phosphoric acid is available. The choice simply requires knowing why it matters. The morning drink that is interfering with your calcium absorption. The second drink on this list is one that will be harder to hear than the first. Not because the evidence is less clear. The evidence is very clear. But because this drink is woven into the daily ritual of most people over 60 in a way that feels non-negotiable. Because it's been there every morning for 40 years. Because the morning does not feel like itself without it. Coffee. Not coffee consumed in moderation. Not coffee consumed away from meals. Not coffee consumed by someone who is meeting their calcium needs through a genuinely calcium-rich diet. But coffee consumed in the quantities that many older adults consume it. Multiple cups per day, often with or immediately after meals, and coffee consumed in the context of the dietary calcium intake that is already borderline for the demands of an aging skeleton. The mechanism is twofold. Caffeine, the active compound in coffee, is a mild diuretic. It increases urine production, And with that increased urine production comes increased urinary calcium excretion. Each cup of coffee causes the body to excrete approximately 5 milligrams of calcium in the urine that it would not otherwise have excreted. 5 milligrams per cup sounds small. 2 cups per day is 10 milligrams. 3 cups is 15 milligrams. Across a year at 3 cups per day, that is approximately 5,500 milligrams of calcium, the equivalent of more than 4 full months of recommended daily calcium intake, excreted to the urine rather than retained and used. The second mechanism is absorption interference. Coffee, and caffeine more broadly, reduces the efficiency with which the small intestine absorbs calcium from food. When coffee is consumed with or immediately after a calcium-rich meal, the calcium that was present in the food is absorbed less completely than it would have been had the coffee been consumed at a different time. A study published in Osteoporosis International found that caffeine intake was significantly and independently associated with reduced bone mineral density in postmenopausal women, the population for whom bone density loss is already at its most accelerated rate. The effect was dose-dependent. The more coffee consumed per day, the greater the reduction in bone mineral density, and the effect was most pronounced in women with low calcium intake, suggesting that adequate calcium can partially offset the caffeine effect, but only partially. Frances is 69. She drinks 3 cups of coffee each day, one with breakfast, one at 11, one after lunch. She has done this since her early 30s. She is not a heavy coffee drinker by modern standards. She is, by the standards of her own social circle, entirely ordinary. Her GP, reviewing her bone density results alongside her dietary history, identified 3 things. Her calcium intake was borderline, not deficient, but not generous. Her vitamin D level was low, which independently reduces calcium absorption. And her 3 daily coffees, consumed at or around meal times, were reducing both her calcium retention through urinary excretion and her calcium absorption from the food she was eating. The intervention was specific and practical. She moved her coffee to at least 1 hour after meals, separating the caffeine from the calcium absorption window. She added a calcium-rich food to her breakfast that she had not been including, and her doctor addressed the vitamin D deficiency with supplementation. Frances did not give up coffee. She moved it 1 hour. The difference to her calcium economy, over months and years, is the difference between a skeleton that is actively building and one that is being quietly depleted. 1 hour. If you drink coffee, and particularly if you drink it with or immediately after meals, consider the timing before you consider giving it up. The coffee is not the enemy. The timing is the variable, and the variable is within your control, starting with your next cup. The daily drink that 70% of seniors have every single day, and what it is doing to their bones. We have arrived at number 3, the one I told you to stay for, the one that will stop most people reading this, not because it is a surprise in the abstract, but because of how ordinary it is, how present it is, how deeply woven into the daily fabric of life after 60. Alcohol. Specifically, alcohol consumed daily, even in what most people would consider moderate amounts. 1 glass of wine in the evening, a beer with dinner, a small measure whiskey before bed. The drink that is not thought of as a drink in the way that excessive drinking is thought of as a drink. The drink that is so ordinary it has almost stopped being noticed. A 2023 survey found that approximately 70% of adults over 60 consume alcohol at least several times per week, with daily consumption being common among those who consider themselves moderate drinkers. And in the context of bone density, that daily moderation is producing consequences that the word moderation does not prepare people for. The mechanisms through which alcohol damages bone are multiple, direct, and well established in the research literature. The first is a direct toxic effect on osteoblasts, the cells responsible for building new bone. Osteoblasts are the construction crew of the skeletal system. They produce the collagen matrix upon which calcium and other minerals are deposited to form new bone tissue. Alcohol directly inhibits osteoblast activity, slowing the rate of new bone formation even when all the necessary building materials are present. The calcium is there. The minerals are there. The construction crew has been sent home early. The second mechanism is hormonal. Alcohol interferes with the production of testosterone and estrogen, both of which play critical roles in bone maintenance. After 60, estrogen levels in women are already significantly reduced following menopause, and testosterone levels in men are naturally declining. Alcohol suppresses both hormones further, removing an already depleted hormonal support system from a skeleton that depends on it. The third mechanism is nutritional. Alcohol interferes with the absorption of calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D in the small intestine, three of the primary nutritional requirements for bone maintenance. It also damages the liver's ability to activate vitamin D, converting it from its stored form into the active form that the body actually uses. A person can have adequate vitamin D in their blood and still be functionally deficient in its effects on bone if their liver's activation capacity has been compromised by regular alcohol consumption. The fourth mechanism is the fall risk amplification. Alcohol affects balance, coordination, and reaction time, particularly in adults over 60, whose vestibular system and proprioceptive accuracy are already naturally declining. The combination of reduced bone density from the first three mechanisms and increased fall risk from the fourth creates a convergence that is, in the research literature, described as one of the most significant contributors to hip fracture risk in older adults. A study published in Osteoporosis International found that adults who consume more than 2 alcoholic drinks per day had a 40% higher risk of hip fracture than non-drinkers. But, and this is a number that most people are not prepared for, adults who consumed 1 drink per day showed a measurably elevated fracture risk compared to non-drinkers. Not 2 drinks. 1. Robert is 73. He has a glass of red wine every evening with dinner, sometimes a second. He has done this for 20 years. He considers it one of the pleasures of his life, the ritual of it as much as the wine itself. And he has read in various places that red wine contains resveratrol and that moderate drinking may be associated with cardiovascular benefits. He has never read anything about what that daily glass is doing to his osteoblasts. His GP, reviewing his bone density scan alongside his lifestyle history, said something that Robert found difficult to hear precisely because it was so specific. He said, "The research on alcohol and bone is not about heavy drinking. It is about daily drinking. And daily is what you're doing." Robert did not stop entirely. He moved his wine to 4 evenings a week instead of 7. He added a calcium-rich food to his dinner on the 3 evenings without wine. And his GP, at the following year's review, noted that his bone density loss had slowed from the rate recorded the year before. 3 evenings without wine. Not deprivation. Arithmetic. The arithmetic of a skeleton that deserves to be considered alongside the pleasure of the ritual that had, until now, been the only thing anyone was thinking about. The drink that masquerades as health while leaching your minerals. The fourth drink is one that most people reaching for believe they are making a good decision. It sits in the health aisle. It is marketed with language about energy and wellness and vitality. It is consumed by people who are trying to do the right thing for their bodies and who have not been told that the right thing and the label on the bottle are not always the same. Energy drinks. The senior population consuming energy drinks is smaller than the younger demographic, but it is growing. And the reasons older adults reach for them are understandable. Fatigue, the desire for mental clarity, the afternoon energy dip that becomes more pronounced after 60, the appeal of something that promises to address those things in a convenient, immediate form. What energy drinks deliver, alongside whatever temporary alertness their caffeine provides, is a combination of compounds that are among the most bone-hostile available in the modern beverage market. First, caffeine in quantities that dwarf a standard cup of coffee. A single can of popular energy drink contains between 80 and 150 milligrams of caffeine, equivalent to 1 to 2 cups of coffee. In the context of bone health, the caffeine effect described in the previous section, urinary calcium excretion, absorption interference, operates at the same intensity but in a more concentrated dose, often consumed more quickly than coffee would be. Second, phosphoric acid, present in many energy drinks for the same flavoring reason. It is present in cola, and producing the same calcium resorption mechanism through the same phosphorus-calcium ratio disruption. Third, high sugar content in the non-diet varieties, and the insulin spike that follows a high-sugar drink increases urinary calcium excretion independently of the caffeine and phosphoric acid effects. 3 separate bone-depleting mechanisms in a single can. Fourth, Vitamin B6 and niacin in the large quantities present in most energy drinks, which, when consumed at the levels found in energy drink formulations, can interfere with the metabolism of vitamin D and calcium in ways that are not fully understood but are the subject of growing research concern. And fifth, the sodium content. Many energy drinks contain significant sodium, and elevated sodium intake increases urinary calcium excretion through a mechanism called hypercalciuria. The kidneys, managing the excess sodium, also excrete excess calcium in the process. A study published in the journal Nutrients found that regular energy drink consumption was associated with significantly lower bone mineral density in young adults, a population whose bones are still developing and whose resorption is naturally low. The implications for adults over 60, whose bone resorption rate is already elevated and whose bone formation rate is already reduced, are considerably more serious. William is 71. His son introduced him to a particular energy drink 2 years ago during a period when William was struggling with afternoon fatigue after a change in his sleep pattern. He began having one each afternoon at around 2 o'clock. He noticed the energy lift and continued. He had no reason to connect the drink to anything concerning. The label said it contained B vitamins. He thought of it as a supplement in drink form. His GP discovered the habit during a dietary review following a routine bone density scan that showed accelerated loss compared to previous year. The energy drink, 1 can per day, 5 days a week, was contributing through at least 4 of the 5 mechanisms described above simultaneously. William switched to a cup of green tea at 2 o'clock. Green tea contains a modest amount of caffeine for the alertness he wanted, approximately 25 to 40 milligrams, alongside EGCG, a catechin that has been shown in research published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry to actually support osteoblast activity and bone formation. The drink he replaced his energy drink with was not merely less damaging, it was actively beneficial. The energy aisle is not the health aisle. They share a shelf in many shops. They do not share biology. The drink that blocks the vitamin your bones cannot function without. The fifth drink is one that has been recommended to seniors for decades as a hydrating, convenient, nutritious addition to the daily diet. It is consumed by millions of older adults every morning as the first drink of the day. It sits in hospital wards and care home dining rooms as a standard component of the morning meal. And in the context of bone health after 60, it has a specific problem that almost nobody talks about: commercially produced orange juice. The kind sold in cartons, pasteurized, often fortified with calcium, often marketed specifically at the senior market with labels that reference bone health. This requires precision because the problem is not the orange juice itself. The problem is what commercially produced orange juice contains in quantities that fresh squeezed orange juice does not, and what that compound does to a specific nutrient that the bones of adults over 60 cannot function without. Commercial orange juice is high in oxalic acid, produced during the pasteurization and storage process, and in the phytate compounds present in the fortification agents used to add calcium. Both oxalic acid and phytates are what nutritionists call anti-nutrients, compounds that bind to minerals in the gut and prevent their absorption. Specifically, they bind to calcium and magnesium, forming insoluble compounds that pass through the digestive tract without being absorbed. Here is a particular cruelty of this mechanism for older adults who are drinking calcium-fortified orange juice, specifically for bone health. The calcium in the fortified juice, the calcium that is the reason for choosing that product, the calcium on the label, the calcium they believe they're consuming for their bones, is partially bound by the oxalic acid and phytates in the same glass. They are consuming the calcium. They are not absorbing it. And the morning ritual they have maintained precisely because they believed it was building their bones has been, in part, working against that intention. But the deeper problem in the context of bone health is the sugar content. A standard 250 milliliters glass of commercial orange juice contains approximately 21 to 26 grams of sugar, equivalent to 5 to 6 teaspoons. That sugar load produces an insulin spike that, as mentioned in the context of energy drinks, independently increases urinary calcium excretion. And commercial orange juice, consumed at breakfast alongside calcium-rich foods, may be reducing the absorption of the calcium in those foods through the anti-nutrient effect simultaneously. A study published in the British Journal of Nutrition found that the oxalate content of commercially processed citrus juice significantly reduced the bioavailability of calcium consumed at the same meal, meaning that the glass of orange juice consumed alongside the yogurt and the fortified cereal was reducing the amount of calcium absorbed from both of those foods. The fifth mechanism, and this is the one specific to adults over 60, is the interaction with vitamin D. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning it requires dietary fat for absorption. Commercial orange juice is fat-free. Consumed on its own or with a fat-free breakfast, it provides no fat matrix for any vitamin D present in the meal to dissolve into. Adults over 60, whose vitamin D levels are already commonly low and who are frequently prescribed vitamin D supplements specifically for bone health, are sometimes inadvertently reducing that supplement's absorption by taking it with a fat-free breakfast washed down with orange juice rather than with a fat-containing food. Agnes is 74. She has drunk a glass of calcium-fortified orange juice every morning for 12 years. She started after her doctor told her she needed to increase her calcium intake. She chose the fortified juice because the calcium content was printed clearly on the label and the packaging referenced bone health. She believed she was doing something precise and beneficial. She had no reason to think otherwise. Her nutritionist, reviewing her diet as part of a comprehensive bone health assessment following an osteopenia diagnosis, identified the orange juice alongside 3 other factors. The oxalate calcium binding was reducing her calcium absorption from the morning meal. The sugar spike was increasing urinary calcium excretion, and she was taking her vitamin D supplement at breakfast without any fat in the meal to facilitate its absorption. Agnes switched to a small glass of fresh squeezed orange juice 3 times a week, lower in oxalic acid from processing, lower in sugar from quantity, and consumed with a breakfast that included avocado or eggs to provide the fat matrix for vitamin D absorption. On the other mornings, she had a glass of full-fat milk or a calcium-set tofu smoothie, both of which delivered bioavailable calcium without the anti-nutrient interference. The label said bone health. The biology was more complicated. It always is. We are at the midpoint, and I want to pause here for a moment. Of the 5 drinks we have covered so far, cola and fizzy drinks, coffee, alcohol, energy drinks, and commercial orange juice, which one surprised you most? Which one are you realizing, right now, has been part of your daily routine without your ever knowing what it was doing to your skeleton? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And I want to know, because the gap between what most people understand about bone health and what the research shows about the drinks that undermine it is one of the widest and most consequential information gaps in the entire field of senior health. And stay with me, because drinks 6 and 7 are the ones that most people have never heard discussed in this context at all. And one of them is consumed by a significant proportion of people over 60 who believe it is actively good for their bones. The trendy drink that is quietly acidifying your body at the expense of your skeleton. The 6th drink sits at the intersection of wellness culture and bone biology, and the collision between the two is instructive. High-dose apple cider vinegar drinks. Kombucha consumed in large quantities. Lemon water consumed in the concentrated form that some wellness communities recommend. Multiple tablespoons of lemon juice in a small amount of water, first thing in the morning, every day. These are drinks that have attracted significant attention in wellness and alternative health communities for their purported benefits: digestive support, metabolic benefits, antimicrobial properties. Some of these claims have evidence behind them. Some do not. What almost none of the discussion around these drinks includes is what happens to the body's acid-base balance when they are consumed in the quantities that some wellness protocols recommend, and what that acid-base shift means for bone. The body maintains its blood pH within a very narrow range, between 7.35 and 7.45, slightly alkaline. This range is non-negotiable. The body will sacrifice almost anything to maintain it, including bone mineral content. When large quantities of acidic compounds enter the body regularly, the blood pH is pushed very slightly downward toward the acidic end of its range. The body responds by releasing alkaline minerals from its largest alkaline mineral reservoir, the skeleton, to buffer the acidity and restore the pH balance. This is the same mechanism described in the context of phosphoric acid and carbonic acid from fizzy drinks, but operating through a different compound and through a different wellness-coded delivery system. The acidity is acidity regardless of whether it arrives in a cola can or an apple cider vinegar shot recommended by a wellness influencer. A study published in the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research found that chronic low-grade acidosis, the state produced by regular consumption of large quantities of acidic foods and drinks, was directly associated with accelerated bone resorption and reduced bone formation. Even when dietary calcium and vitamin D were adequate, the body was pulling minerals from bone to manage the acid load regardless of what was being put in to replace them. The distinction that matters here is quantity and concentration. A tablespoon of apple cider vinegar diluted in a full glass of water, consumed occasionally, is unlikely to produce a measurable acidic load on the body. 2 to 4 tablespoons in a small amount of water, consumed daily, as some protocols recommend, is a different matter. Large quantities of kombucha, which can contain significant organic acids depending on fermentation time, consumed daily is a different matter. Concentrated lemon water protocols, repeated every morning, are a different matter. The wellness intention is real. The bone biology does not respond to intention. It responds to chemistry. And the chemistry of high-dose acidic drinks is a chemistry of bone mineral depletion, regardless of the health claims on the label or the wellness community from which the protocol originated. Catherine is 68. She has been following a wellness protocol for 3 years that includes 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar in warm water every morning, a large glass of lemon water before lunch, and 3 glasses of kombucha throughout the day. She is, by any external measure, a person who takes her health seriously. She exercises regularly, eats a predominantly whole food diet, and has consulted multiple wellness practitioners about her routine. None of them had mentioned bone pH. None of them had mentioned alkaline buffering. None of them had mentioned what her morning acid protocol was asking her skeleton to do before breakfast. Her bone density scan at 68, conducted after a minor wrist fracture sustained during a yoga class, revealed bone density loss significantly greater than her dietary and exercise history would predict. Her GP, reviewing the results alongside her detailed wellness protocol, identified the acid load as a significant contributing factor. Catherine did not abandon her wellness practices. She reduced the apple cider vinegar to 1 teaspoon in a full glass of water. She diluted her lemon water significantly. She reduced her kombucha to 1 glass per day, and she added alkaline-forming foods, dark leafy greens, almonds, sweet potato, to her daily diet to balance the acid load she was continuing to consume. Wellness and bone health are not opposed, but they require the same thing that all health decisions require: information that goes deeper than the label and the protocol and the recommendation of someone who may not have considered the specific biology of a skeleton over 60. The drink most seniors think is building their bones, that is actually working against them. We have arrived at the 7th drink, and this is the one I want you to sit with for a moment, because it is the most counterintuitive thing on this list, and the most important to understand precisely: excessive milk consumption. Specifically, the practice, common among older adults who have been told they need more calcium, of drinking 3, 4, or 5 glasses of milk per day in an attempt to address bone density concerns. Milk is a source of calcium. This is not in dispute. Full-fat milk contains approximately 300 milligrams of calcium per 250 milliliters glass, a meaningful contribution to the recommended daily intake of 1,200 milligrams for adults over 50. In reasonable quantities, milk can be a useful part of a bone-supported diet. The problem is what happens when milk becomes a primary calcium strategy, consumed in large quantities, multiple times per day, as a main response to a bone density concern, without the other nutritional cofactors that determine whether the calcium in the milk actually reaches the bone. The first issue is that calcium from milk, like calcium from any source, requires vitamin D for absorption. Vitamin D deficiency in adults over 60 is extraordinarily common, estimated to affect between 40 and 70% of older adults in Northern European and North American climates. Without adequate active vitamin D, the calcium in milk, regardless of how much milk is consumed, is absorbed at a fraction of its potential. The person drinks 4 glasses of milk per day and absorbs, through vitamin D deficiency, less usable calcium than someone drinking 2 glasses with optimal vitamin D status. The second issue is that milk is high in animal protein, and high animal protein intake increases the body's acid load, triggering the same alkaline buffering response from bone described in the context of acidic drinks. Large quantities of milk consumed daily can increase the acid load sufficiently to trigger bone mineral release that partially offsets the calcium being delivered. The calcium goes in. The acid load pulls calcium out. The net benefit is smaller than the label and the intention suggest. The third issue is specific to adults over 60 and is the most significant. Milk contains significant quantities of calcium in a form that competes with magnesium for absorption in the small intestine. When large amounts of calcium are consumed together, they suppress the absorption of magnesium, a mineral that is independently essential for bone health, that is involved in activating vitamin D, and that is already commonly deficient in adults over 60. The attempt to build bone through excessive milk consumption can simultaneously deplete the magnesium that bone formation requires and suppress the activation of the vitamin D that calcium absorption depends on. A study published in the British Medical Journal, the famous Harvard Nurses' Health Study, tracking over 77,000 women over 12 years, found that women who consumed the most milk had no significant reduction in hip fracture risk compared to those who consumed the least. The calcium was not translating into the fracture protection that the calcium was supposed to provide. The reason, which subsequent research has clarified, is that calcium in isolation without adequate vitamin D, magnesium, vitamin K2, and the alkaline dietary environment that allows it to be deposited into bone rather than into soft tissue, does not build bone the way the simple logic of calcium equals strong bone suggests. Edward is 75. Following a bone density scan that revealed osteopenia, his GP advised him to increase his calcium intake. Edward, determined to address this seriously, began drinking 4 glasses of milk per day. He also took a calcium supplement. He was consuming approximately 2,400 milligrams of calcium per day, double the recommended intake, and he was confident that he was doing everything right. At his follow-up scan 2 years later, his bone density had continued to decline at roughly the same rate as before. His GP looked at the results and then looked at his dietary record and identified 3 things. His vitamin D level was critically low. The calcium he was consuming was being absorbed at reduced efficiency. His magnesium level was below the reference range. The high calcium intake had been suppressing magnesium absorption, and his blood showed mildly elevated calcium in the soft tissue, a concern that arises when calcium intake is high, but vitamin D and K2 are not present to direct that calcium into bone rather than into arterial walls. Edward reduced his milk to 2 glasses per day and replaced the excess with a diverse range of calcium sources. Calcium set tofu, tinned sardines with bones, dark leafy greens, almonds. His GP added vitamin D supplementation, a magnesium glycinate supplement, and vitamin K2. His dietary patterns shifted from calcium quantity to calcium bioavailability. His bone density at the next scan had stabilized for the first time since his diagnosis. More milk was not the answer. The right condition for calcium to do its job was the answer. And those conditions required a conversation that went considerably further than drink more milk. Let us bring all 7 together. Because the most important thing to understand about this list is not any individual drink in isolation. It is the pattern. The way that the drinks most people consume daily, without suspicion, without awareness, and in some cases with the active belief that they're doing something beneficial, are collectively creating a bone environment that is accelerating the very loss that Marva experienced on a Tuesday morning in her kitchen. Cola and fizzy drinks pull calcium from bone through phosphoric acid and carbonic acid every time they're consumed. Coffee, consumed with or around meals and in multiple daily cups, reduces calcium absorption and increases urinary calcium excretion. Alcohol, consumed daily even in modest amounts, directly inhibits the osteoblasts that build new bone, suppresses the hormones that protect bone, and interferes with calcium and vitamin D absorption simultaneously. Energy drinks deliver bone-hostile compounds in concentrated doses, while masquerading as health products. Commercial orange juice binds calcium through oxalic acid and anti-nutrients, while spiking blood sugar and increasing urinary calcium loss. High-dose acidic wellness drinks acidify the internal environment and trigger the body's alkaline buffering response, drawing minerals from bone to neutralize the acid load. And excessive milk consumption, pursued as a calcium solution, without the cofactors that make calcium work, can create a calcium-magnesium imbalance and a vitamin D insufficiency that prevents the calcium from reaching the bone where it is needed. 7 drinks. 7 mechanisms. 1 skeleton that, after 60, is working with less reserve, less resilience, and less capacity to absorb the insults of uninformed daily habit than it had at any earlier point in life. This is not a counsel of deprivation. Margaret did not need to eliminate every pleasure from her kitchen. She needed to know what was in it and what it was doing. That knowledge, specific, honest, biological, is what she deserved before the ceramic pot and the Tuesday morning and the sound that was not a crack but a collapse. You have that knowledge now. And knowledge, in the context of a skeleton that can still be protected, still be supported, still be given what it needs to resist the next ceramic pot and the next Tuesday morning, is not a small thing. It is everything. Here is what I want you to do right now. Go to your kitchen. Open your refrigerator. Look at what is in there. And look at it with the eyes of someone who now knows what these 7 drinks are doing. Not with guilt. Not with anxiety. With the particular clear-eyed attention of someone who has just been given information they intend to use. Pick 1 drink from your daily routine that you now understand differently. Just 1. And decide, today, this afternoon, starting with your next drink, what you're going to replace it with or how you're going to change the way you consume it. Not all 7 at once. 1. Drop in the comments. Tell me which drink you are addressing first. I read every comment, and I want to know, because the bones that are protected by the decisions made in kitchen cupboards and refrigerators are the bones that keep people out of rehabilitation wards and off the surgical lists and in their own homes doing the things they love for the years they deserve. Share this with someone you love, a partner, a sibling, a friend who reaches for the Diet Cola or the glass of wine in the evening, without any idea of what is happening in their skeleton while they do. The information in this video is the information that Margaret needed before the kitchen counter. Give it to someone before their kitchen counter. Subscribe if you have not already. New videos every week, grounded in real science, told through real stories, made for people who want to understand their own bodies rather than simply hope for the best. Because Margaret went home from rehabilitation and looked at her refrigerator differently. She did not empty it. She changed what she reached for, and she told anyone who would listen, which turned out to be more people than she expected, that the most powerful thing anyone had ever done for her health was not the surgery or the rehabilitation or the medication. It was a conversation nobody had with her for 67 years. Consider this that conversation.